The moment I opened my eyes, there was no excruciating pain of bones snapping, nor the cold, piercing beep of a cardiac monitor from the ICU. Instead, I was greeted by the sweet fragrance of essential oils in the VIP lounge of the Sky Club, accompanied by the crisp clinking sound of ice cubes hitting a whiskey glass. As I looked into the mirror and saw my vibrant reflection with both legs intact, I slowly loosened my clenched fists. The electronic calendar on the table indicated today's date, exactly the day my previous life's nightmare began. In my past life, I was a top-tier engineer in the industry, while Clara was a famous campus beauty. With her beautiful appearance and carefully cultivated flawless persona, she attracted legions of admirers on social media. Eric, my former colleague and ex-boyfriend, was a slick opportunist, outwardly refined yet secretly treacherous. On this day in that life, Clara had invited a whole circle of friends to the city's highest-end polar skydiving club, to present herself as a fearless, sexy thrill-seeker to the cameras. She secretly tampered with the structure of her main parachute, but when they reached 10,000 meters, a sudden storm hit, her improperly modified canopy became severely entangled, and she plummeted at free-fall speed toward the navigation drift zone. At that critical second, I, who saw her as my closest friend, acted out of instinct and loyalty, sacrificing my own safety. I ripped open my reserve chute and barely intercepted her midair, dragging her back under a safe canopy. But in doing so, my emergency chute was damaged, causing a crash landing that shattered both my legs and caused massive internal bleeding, effectively ending my career. What did I get in return? Nothing but betrayal. While I lay bedridden, Clara and Eric didn't express a single word of gratitude. Instead, they quietly colluded. Clara publicly blamed my supposedly reckless operation for her trauma. Meanwhile, Eric stole the core project source code from my computer and claimed it as their joint success to impress industry giants. When I attempted to fight for justice despite my shattered body, they pushed me down the stairs together, fabricating it as a suicide due to despair over my disability. This second chance, fate had given me the perfect answer. Just then, the lounge door opened, and Clara strode in wearing an unrealistically tight and body-hugging jumpsuit. Her dramatic makeup and phone held high, live streaming. She pouted at me with prissy charm. "Hey, Irene. When we jump later, you absolutely must follow me closely. The fans are waiting for our aerial duet. As our tech advisor, don't embarrass me on camera." Behind her, Eric flashed his trademark fake smile, placing a hand on my shoulder while whispering, "Irene, give Clara plenty of screen time afterward. Her viewership is insane right now. Once she becomes famous, our project will secure more sponsorships. Just cooperate." I coldly stared at Eric's hand on my shoulder and subtly sidestepped away. Gazing at these two, each cleverly hiding their dark intentions, my heart felt no emotion, only a shiver of icy satisfaction. "Don't worry," I said to Clara, incredulously lifting a teasing smile. "This jump will definitely be unforgettable for you." A few minutes later, we boarded the aircraft carrying divers to 10,000 meters. The cabin door slid open against the ferocious high-altitude wind, howling like a beast. Clara stood at the threshold, posing provocatively in front of her handheld camera, completely ignoring repeated security warnings from the dive instructor. I watched as she casually fastened the modified parachute pack, its clasp tampered with just for better appearance. "Everyone ready? The goddess will take you flying." Clara shouted the final lines to the camera before leaping into the 10,000-meter sky. Eric followed right behind, and me, as the last one to exit the aircraft, adjusted my optimal gliding posture midair, coldly observing everything below. Upon reaching the predetermined altitude, Clara suddenly yanked the main parachute release. Bang! Instead of the expected graceful parachute bloom, chaos erupted. Because she had tampered with the arming wiring inside the chute pack, the massive wind shear instantly entangled the main parachute lines into a grotesque tangle. The canopy flapped violently in the air like a torn rag, providing zero lift. "Help! Irene! Save me! Save me!" A heart-wrenching scream tore through her voice via the radio, the sheer panic having completely distorted her tone. In the fierce storm at 10,000 meters, she plummeted like a meteor towards the erratic rocks below. In my past life, at this very second, I had unhesitatingly released my own harness and desperately lunged at her. But not this time. I pressed the radio's mute button with my hand, gently adjusting my parachute's airfoil. I used the rising gusts to hover safely above the clouds. From high above, I watched her flail rapidly in the air. She screamed in utter desperation. The wind ripped off her wig, ruined her meticulous makeup, leaving nothing but raw, ugly terror. Slowly and calmly, I pulled my control lines, gliding steadily toward the designated safe landing zone. The fierce wind high up stung my face like blades, yet the world before my eyes had never been so clear. Clara wildly flailed her arms midair, her body beginning to spin rapidly in the sky due to gravity and tangled parachute lines. The safety harness on her chest, intentionally loosened for better posing in photos, suddenly gave way with a pop during violent buffeting. Her entire parachute instantly shifted upward, tightly entangling around her neck. "Irene, where are you? My chute is malfunctioning. Help me!" Her last cry, trembling with tears, came again through the radio. The memory of a past life overlapped with the present. Back then, I had rushed over, disregarding everything in such screams, using my backup parachute to cushion her fall, only to end up with both legs shattered and my spine gravely injured. Now, I simply calmly raised my wrist and glanced at the altimeter on my watch. 4,000 meters. 3,500 meters. Eric beside her tried to move in to assist, but he himself was only an amateur skydiver. Under such strong wind shear, he could barely keep his own balance. As soon as he got near, powerful gusts thrust him several meters away. "Irene, go save her. You're the best jumper." Eric roared furiously into the radio, his tone full of assumed authority. I let out a cold chuckle, then slowly pressed the transmit button and said in a tone of extreme calm, even veiled with innocence, "Sorry, the airflow is too unstable. According to skydiving safety procedures, unauthorized personnel attempting rescue when a teammate's parachute entanglement occurs may result in dual fatalities. Clara, cut the main chute immediately. Pull your reserve." "I can't pull it. The reserve's locking mechanism jammed." Clara screamed desperately into the radio. Of course she couldn't. Just before the jump, having privately affixed the emergency ripcord of her reserve parachute to her waist strap with a strong metal clamp to emphasize her waistline for more aesthetic photos, that violation, possibly undetectable in normal circumstances, had become, at this life-or-death moment, an invisible shackle. That very metal clamp she treated as decorative jewelry had become the very lock sealing off her escape route. 3,000 meters. Clara's main chute had become a lifeless tangle around her arms. Like a puppet with broken wings, she plummeted straight down toward the unsafe drop zone, the rocky plateau below. Meanwhile, I adjusted my wingsuit, maintaining the standard safest 5-level descent posture, calmly hovering 100 meters above her. From this elevated vantage point, I watched her, observing the bottomless fear and helplessness flooding her eyes. She looked up and spotted me. High in the crisp sky, she could see clearly how my hands held the control toggles steady, no sudden dive, no rescue mechanism deployed, only a cold, distant gaze, like that of someone watching a corpse, silently observing her. At that moment, the fear in her eyes transformed into disbelief, then into pure hatred. "Irene, you let me die. You bitch!" Her curses were instantly shredded by the roaring wind. 2,000 meters. 1,000 meters. The designated drift zone lay in uncharted rocky ridges of the geological park, filled everywhere with jagged stalwart stones and fractured rock formations. Bang! A dull explosion echoed through the valley. Even from hundreds of meters above, I could clearly see the pink chute pancake against a pile of sharp rocks like a used rag. The tremendous impact even kicked up a cloud of dust. Then came the second heavy thud, the sound of her body slamming fiercely onto the stone surface. I saw her 2 legs broken at an extremely twisted, anatomically impossible angle. Her entire body convulsing violently in the jagged crevices of stone. Sharp fragments of rock instantly lacerated her cheek, blood splattering all over her carefully chosen skydiving suit. The sky returned to an eerie silence. I deftly controlled my parachute, arcing elegantly across the sky, landing with precise grace several kilometers away in the designated grassy landing zone. Unclipping my harness and removing my helmet, I ran my fingers through my long, smooth hair. Not a hint of panic or guilt crossed my face. A few minutes later, Eric stumbled onto the grass, in disarray, rushing toward me, his face flushed and eyes brimming with anger. Irene, why didn't you save her just now? You could have saved her. You killed her. I turned to face him, cold eyes locking onto his, the chill in my gaze making him involuntarily shiver. Killed her? I pulled out my phone and dialed emergency and medical services, my voice unfazed. Rule 15 of skydiving safety. Any unauthorized personnel are strictly prohibited from performing high-risk mid-air rescues. Second, she had tampered with her own parachute. Eric, if you think it's my fault for not saving her, you were closest to her a moment ago. Why didn't you cut your own parachute and go embrace her instead? Dumbfounded, Eric turned pale, rendered speechless by my words. In the distance, the roar of an approaching medical helicopter grew louder. I gazed at the rescue chopper approaching on the horizon and let a faint smile linger at the corner of my lips. Outside the emergency room, the corridor was filled with the sharp odor of disinfectant. The operating room door was tightly shut, its red and surgery indicator light unusually glaring. After several hours of emergency treatment, Clara had survived. But the outcome was exactly the same as in my previous life. Her legs were crushed in horrific fractures, her face severely lacerated by sharp rocks, facing permanent disfigurement and paraplegia. I sat on a bench in the hallway, calmly browsing project materials on my phone. Suddenly, the ICU door opened. Clara, transferred to a regular ward and completely wrapped in bandages, her legs elevated high, had just woken up from anesthesia. Upon seeing me standing by the doorway, her swollen, bloodshot eyes instantly brimmed with murderous hatred. It's her! Irene! Clara shouted hoarsely, her voice as dry and crackling as a broken bellows losing air. Pointing at me, she screamed to several company executives and journalists gathered by her bedside. She sabotaged my main parachute before the jump. She envied me for having more fans than her and resented my good relationship with Eric. She wanted me dead on purpose. Eric, standing nearby, immediately joined in, his face showing deep sorrow and anger. Exactly. From the air, I clearly saw Irene had enough time and proximity to rush over and grab Clara, but she just watched coldly, deliberately even turning off her radio. This is murder. Pure jealousy and malicious revenge. Instantly, several company executives and self-media bloggers they'd privately summoned turned questioning eyes on me, their gazes brimming with suspicion and condemnation. Irene, what exactly happened here? General Manager Zhang, in charge of the project, approached with a gloomy expression. Clara was the central cover figure for our new product launch. Now with this tragedy, if it's confirmed your personal grudges caused this accident, not only will you bear legal liability, but you'll also be liable for all company-wide project losses. Seeing this, a calculating glint flashed across Eric's eyes. He stepped forward, adopting a condescending, moral hijacking tone toward me. Irene, for the sake of our past relationship, if you now take responsibility voluntarily and transfer your core patents under your name to Clara as rehabilitation funding and compensation, and resign willingly, we might consider not reporting you to the police for criminal charges. Watching their perfectly coordinated performance, I almost laughed out loud. In my previous life, it was exactly this method, the manipulation of public opinion and pressure from company leadership, that forced me to reluctantly sign an unequal settlement agreement, stripping me of all my project achievements. Destroyed my parachute secretly? Maximum compensation? Transfer patents? I slowly stood up, arms crossed, my gaze sweeping over everyone in the room. Clara, you claim I sabotaged your parachute. Where is your evidence? Just your disfigured mouth? You! How dare you mock my face? Clara lost control of her emotions, shrieking and attempting to sit up, but pulling at her wounds twisted her already agonized face. All the equipment was at the club. You are closest to my gear. Very well. I sneered coldly. Since you brought up equipment and evidence, I've already informed the Municipal Safety Supervision Bureau, a top-tier third-party equipment testing agency, and the director of the Skydiving Club. They should now be on their way to the hospital with all previously sealed site materials. Eric's facial muscles twitched violently. He clearly hadn't anticipated my foreground decisiveness and composure. He coughed dryly, trying to regain control. Irene, Cut that act short. Something happened, and as the only senior technical consultant present, you're unavoidably implicated. Don't even attempt to shift blame. Whether I'm shifting blame or not isn't up to you, nor the company, it's up to objective data. I adjusted my collar, walked steadily to the bedside, and looked down at the immobile Clara. Clara, did you really think that by colluding with Eric to turn the tables, you could steal my patent and get me to pay your bills for the rest of your life? I advise you, while you still have the strength, to think about how you'll face the police once the test report comes out. The air in the ward seemed to freeze instantly. Clara stared into my cold, confident eyes and felt an inexplicable wave of intense panic rise within her. Outside the window, the sound of sirens and the roaring of vehicles from the authoritative testing agency approached from afar with sudden intensity. The atmosphere in the hospital's visiting lounge was heavy and tense, with officials from the Municipal Safety Supervision Bureau, representatives from the police, top-tier third-party equipment experts, and the head of the skydiving club all present. Corporate executives, including General Manager Zhang, Eric, who looked deathly pale, and Clara, wheeled in on a wheelchair, tightly packed the space. Several self-media bloggers pointed their cameras directly at me, and under Eric's prior incitement, online barrage comments and audience sentiment overwhelmingly condemned my supposed envy and heartlessness. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric pointed at me with righteous indignation, shouting loudly, Irene is our team's chief technical advisor. Before the jump, she had full access to Clara's parachute for a solid 30 minutes. Clara plummeted off the cliff because the main parachute's firing signal was tampered with. We demand her immediate arrest and freezing of her personal assets for compensation. Seated in a wheelchair, Clara was wrapped entirely in bandages, her face covered with gauze, only showing eyes clouded with bloodshot veins. Managing to sob out, she was my best friend. I never imagined that for the sake of claim priority over the company's project, she would stake a life-threatening attempt on me in the thousands of meters of altitude. A ripple of disgusted murmurs spread through the onlookers. I stared impassively at the two melodramatic performers, calmly pulled a high-end industrial laptop from my briefcase, and directly connected it to the large display of the hall. Finished yet? I coldly glanced at them, then pressed play. Since you two love citing technology and equipment, let's talk numbers. On the large screen instantaneously flashed an extremely sophisticated 3D rendering and dense low-level code logs. First, I typed on the keyboard to access the cloud-based raw data from the Skydiving Club's polar-grade parachute mounting recorder. All high-altitude parachute bags used by the Skydiving Club are equipped with Swiss-imported black box sensor chips. It is clear from the data that within the past 24 hours before the jump, there were 3 total openings recorded, each with fingerprint identification and NFC check-ins, all linked to Clara herself. On the screen, a crisp fingerprint comparison report and high-definition surveillance screenshots from the club's lounge were displayed, showing Clara seizing an opportunity when no one was paying attention, secretly using scissors and metal clamps to forcibly dismantle the main parachute's internal safety trigger lock. The audience immediately erupted into gasps. Clara's eyes suddenly widened, her face turning deathly pale. This is impossible. The camera recordings clearly. You thought if you deleted the surveillance footage from the club's local computers, there would be no backup? I sneered. My apologies, but the club's cloud security system was personally architected by me years ago. Whenever irregular activities occur, raw data automatically backs up across multiple devices. I then opened a second document, an official report from an internationally authoritative equipment evaluation agency and a reconstruction video. Second, I continued. Based on the agency's mechanical dissection of the crashed parachute recovered from the crash site, Clara's main parachute suffered severe entanglement because she attempted to showcase so-called extreme waistlines and alluring curves. On live broadcast, she privately cut and modified the main parachute's load-bearing fixation straps, and used ordinary decorative metal clips to erroneously connect the backup chute's emergency ripcord to her waistband. The on-screen video vividly demonstrated that at 10,000 meters altitude, under fierce high-altitude winds, the metal clip she had custom inexpertly modified bent, jammed solid, causing the main parachute's firing ring to tangle, and then the backup chute completely failed to open. This is a textbook case of illegal modification and unsafe operation leading to a serious safety catastrophe. An equipment expert stood forward, holding within a sealed box the damaged metal clip as evidence. It has nothing to do with any third-party individuals. If Ms. Irene had forced herself closer to rescue them in that malfunction state, both of them would have inevitably entangled midair and plummeted to their deaths together. The truth came out. Public opinion instantly swung 180 degrees, pressures turned sharply onto Clara and Eric. Using illegal modifications and cutting corners for attention, then turning the tables to accuse professionals when something goes wrong? I advanced step by step toward the ashen-faced Eric and trembling Clara, my gaze sharp and piercing. Eric, you just said you'd freeze my assets and hold me criminally liable? Right here, in front of the police and the regulatory authority, I now officially declare. I turn to face the officers and safety inspectors. I am formally accusing Clara of false accusation and intentional sabotage of public safety equipment. At the same time, I accuse Eric of complicity in rumor-mongering, defamation, and personal reputation infringement. All evidence has already been securely transmitted to my legal team. Clara slumped in her wheelchair, eyes filled with despair and panic, utterly speechless. Meanwhile, Eric broke into cold sweat, unable to even glance in my direction. After the police launched an investigation into the scandal of false accusations, Clara and Eric quickly became pariahs. Yet instead of accepting their fate, these two revealed an unimaginable level of malice and shamelessness. Due to severe physical disabilities and facial disfigurement, Clara was completely ostracized from her former high society circle. In order to cover the high costs of ongoing treatment and living expenses, she and Eric decided to take a drastic turn and shift to short video platforms. Just 1 week later, an account named Brave Wingless Angel Clara rapidly rose to prominence across various social media sites. In meticulously edited videos, Clara lay in her hospital bed, her face covered with large medical gauzes, tears clinging to her eyelids. With a hoarse yet gentle voice, she sobbed to netizens, claiming that though she had lost both her legs and her appearance in a traumatic accident and had also been bullied and abandoned by her once trusted best friend, she still chose to forgive everything, vowing to live on bravely and resiliently. Eric, on the other hand, portrayed the flawless boyfriend committed to her, never leaving her side and overflowing with deep affection. He would feed Clara her medicine, massage her atrophied legs, and even during live streams watched by millions, profess his love passionately. Even if you never walk again, even if your face can never be restored, you will always be the only goddess in my life. This tragic narrative of a strong, inspirational disabled woman matched with the devotedly loving boyfriend instantly ignited the sympathy of uninformed netizens. In just a few days, the account grew a massive 2 million followers and even reached the top of the trending charts. Following this sudden popularity came an avalanche of monetization. They began aggressively selling products and live broadcasts under the banners of charitable fundraising for the disabled and recovering treatment funds, directing their fans to make purchases and launching waves of online donation drives, amassing millions in cash within just a few days. Beyond that, they manipulated public opinion online once again. Thousands of misled fans strode into my social media comments section, launching scathing online harassment campaigns, hurling insults at me as an unfeeling murderous witch and a heartless beast who watched someone die while taunting them. Watching this farcical performance, I coldly exhaled in scorn. Did they seriously believe that by exploiting fleeting internet memory and hollow emotional manipulation, they could wash away their sins? They had no idea that the entire industry chain preceding Clara's rise as an internet celebrity was one fully known and controlled by me. In my previous life, when Clara was still a minor internet sensation, I not only helped build the back-end data model of her self-media network, but at her request also processed large volumes of raw video footage for her. In the corner of her phone and cloud storage servers, countless undeliberated leaks original clips remained, even forgotten by Clara herself. This time, I decided to deliver a final, shattering blow to her inspirational goddess facade. At 8 p.m. on Friday, during Clara and Eric's livestream peak selling hour, over 500,000 viewers were online. High-value gifts flooded the screen, and fundraising labeled products were instantly sold out. Clara tearfully addressed her fans on camera. "Thank you all. It's your love that has reignited hope in my life. Although some people still slander and hurt me behind my back, I don't hate them. As she drowned in the fantasy she herself had crafted, an unexpected connection request shattered the warm atmosphere of the livestream. The caller was my verified official account. Before administrators could react to cut the connection, I had already hacked into the broadcast source via pre-programmed automated scripts, seized control of their live stream signal, and directly took over the main screen. Clara, Eric, I hear you two have been raking in the cash lately by playing the inspirational disabled and devoted boyfriend personas? My voice rang clearly through the live stream with over 500,000 viewers. Irene? You harridan! What are you doing? Cut this connection now. Eric's face turned pale on camera, frantically trying to pull the power cord from his computer. Don't bother. I sneered coldly. Everyone loves watching inspirational stories, right? Today I'm going to show you some even more exciting unreleased footage. In the next second, the livestream screen instantly split into a 4-panel high-definition raw video feed. The first video was the original footage of Clara doing a check-in for an extreme sport before her injury. In it, she performed difficult tricks on a skateboard, but as soon as the scene shifted, candid behind-the-scenes footage clearly revealed the stunt double's face. Meanwhile, Clara herself sat comfortably in the nearby nanny van, eating bird's nest soup, hurling vicious and crude abuse at her assistant. Why'd you find a stunt double with such a bad body type? It makes my legs look huge. Cut half her pay after this. The second video was a real voice recording of Clara in the hospital during the initial days after her injury. There was not a shred of toughness or forgiveness in her words, only hysterical screams and venomous curses. Once I've made enough money exploiting this disability, I'm so hiring the best enforcers to come and break Irene's legs too. And those fans who insult me online? Just a bunch of brainless, poor peasants. Just cry a little more, and they'll hand over their money. They're such gullible fools. The third video was a secretly recorded private phone call between Eric and a PR company executive. His tone filled with cold calculation. Building Clara's resilient disabled image gets the most traffic. After this wave of hype, we transfer the crowdfunding money offshore. Then I'll find an excuse to break up with her, who'd want to spend their whole life caring for a disfigured, paralyzed invalid? The live audience of 500,000 immediately erupted into chaos. After 2 seconds of stunned silence, comments began flooding in at tens of thousands per second. My God, so this is her real face? So disgusting. Treating fans like idiots? Using donation money like chaff? And even planning to hire thugs? The worst is this man, playing the romantic lover while privately looking down on her as useless and planning to steal the charity funds? Refund. Give back the rehabilitation funds we donated. This is fraud. Total, complete fraud. Clara and Eric in front of the camera were completely petrified. Clara, staring at the videos and her own cruel recordings playing on screen, changed from pale white to purple, shaking violently. She didn't even notice the gauze covering her facial wound had come loose. Eric collapsed onto the floor, his face pale as death. Clara, Eric, I said in my coldest tone, ringing their funeral bell. Using false personas to illegally collect donations and raising funds. Suspected of malicious fraud, you will find your lives prolonged no longer in hospitals or livestream studios than I've already forwarded the relevant evidence to the Economic Investigation Bureau and Market Supervision Administration. Immediately after my words, heavy knocking came from outside the livestream view. Then several police officers in uniform from the Economic Investigation Unit and market regulators pushed through the door, displaying their case filing notices and enforcement credentials. After the public facade of Clara's self-pity scam was completely exposed, all of her social media accounts were banned, and the Economic Investigation Department froze the funds from their illegal crowdfunding. Clara, severely injured and paralyzed, had to lie in her hospital bed, barely surviving under the scrutiny of the economic investigation. Meanwhile, Eric, eager to protect himself, severed all ties with Clara without hesitation. He blamed all the illegal crowdfunding on Clara, who was bedridden, claiming he was merely an innocent victim blinded by love. Having ditched Clara as a burden, Eric tried to re-enter the industry circle. Using connections and positions he accumulated within the guild, he began ruthless retaliation and blacklisting against me. At that time, I was serving as the chief architect and presiding over the launch and review of a groundbreaking project in the industry, the Smart High-Altitude Safety Early Warning System. This was the culmination of my efforts across lifetimes, and the critical step toward regaining my career peak. However, the day before the guild planned to officially release the project, Eric teamed up with several senior reviewers he was close to and initiated an internal investigation and accusation against me within the industry. Using his status as a guild council member, he submitted a joint public complaint letter to industry regulators, the academic committee, and major partner enterprises, alleging serious academic and professional falsifications on my part. He claimed that the core algorithm of my fundamental architecture had been his original research results, and that I had stolen his code during our romantic relationship by exploiting my official position. In addition, Eric used his influence to issue an industry-wide notice, instructing all partners to suspend cooperation on my project pending the outcome of the review, attempting to permanently terminate my career and destroy me professionally. During the internal industry evaluation meeting, Eric stood arrogantly on stage in a crisp suit, his face full of conceit and smugness. "Dear experts, colleagues," Eric declared solemnly, even fabricating a local hard drive revision record from several years ago. "All of Irene's past accomplishments were built upon stealing my academic work. She is not only morally corrupt, having abandoned her partner in the skydiving accident, but also fundamentally dishonest in both academia and technology. Someone like her must be completely removed from our industry." The senior experts seated below exchanged glances nervously, while many partner representatives also displayed hesitation and doubt. Facing unanimous skepticism from the audience, I smiled, adjusted my suit button, and walked steadily onto the podium. I ignored Eric's commanding gaze and directly inserted my encrypted USB drive into the central projection system. "Eric," I asked clearly through the mic, echoing throughout the hall, "didn't you just say that the core algorithm of my foundational architecture was independently developed by you several years ago?" "Yes. The original version is right here on my laptop." Eric snapped his head up, confident and adamant. "Very well," I sneered, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's then compare and see who the real thief is." Instantly, two massive code comparison windows and the complete Git version control system's underlying commit log appeared on the large screen. "Everyone, please look at the screen." I pointed to the densely packed logs. "This is my open source code repository and the timeline of patent applications submitted to the National Intellectual Property Administration. Each code module submission bears a blockchain-certified, tamper-proof timestamp. The earliest version was written 5 years ago." I then opened Eric's so-called original batch of compiled source data. "And regarding this so-called original draft, submitted by Eric, I would like to draw your attention especially to lines 142 through 188. I enlarged the code locally, and immediately the entire audience burst into laughter. Because in those few critical lines of algorithmic comments, my personal English name abbreviation and a debugging log were clearly written. Irene's private logic, do not touch. Eric's face instantly turned from smug to liver-colored, sweat beading heavily on his forehead. He froze on stage, trembling and speechless. "You even copied my code without bothering to remove the private debug comments I left behind. How dare you come here accusing me of plagiarism?" I coldly stared at him, but my counterattack was far from over. "Since we're talking about fabricating professional and academic records, let's dig deeper." I pressed next page. And official authorization request forms stamped by the industry regulatory body and academic committee suddenly appeared on the big screen. First, the 3 core papers Eric submitted for his senior engineer title application were found, after verification by the National Academic Integrity Investigation Group, to have an 89% overlap, entirely plagiarized and ghostwritten by paid third parties from overseas scholars. Second, during his tenure as previous project lead, he abused his position to sexually harass and exploit 3 female interns over an extended period. Here are complete chat records, hotel bills, and signed complaint letters filed by the victims. Third, he illegitimately solicited exorbitant consulting fees from several small businesses under the guise of his authority in the industry association, all suspected of serious non-public official bribery. Piles of irrefutable evidences, bank transaction records, chat screenshots. and official revocation notices issued by the academic committee flashed across the screen. Each image was a heavy slap to his face. Industry leaders and experts in the audience angrily stood up, slamming their tables. This is outrageous. A disgrace to our profession. Strip him of all professional titles. He must be handed over to judicial authorities. Completely blacklist him. We must never allow someone like him to remain in our industry. Staring at the irrefutable evidence on the screen, Eric's legs went weak. He collapsed onto the podium, his arrogance replaced by endless terror. Eric, you thought you could blacklist me? I looked down at him coldly, voice icy and sharp. Sorry, the one who'll be thoroughly blacklisted, ruined, and facing prison time is you. The committee immediately issued a ruling. All industry titles removed, academic achievements revoked, and temporary professional qualification permanently revoked. Simultaneously, police and investigators marched into the venue, taking the ashen-faced Eric away for immediate investigation. After being thoroughly blacklisted by the industry and facing multiple investigations, Eric temporarily obtained a bail opportunity by paying a huge sum. At the same time, Clara fell into a desperate situation due to severe complications, and the two, who had lost all sources of funds, were like cornered stray dogs. They knew clearly that once the police and prosecutors' investigations ended, they would face a long prison life. Extreme madness and greed pushed them to take one final, desperate gamble. That night, after I finished overtime, I was about to drive home from the company's underground parking lot. As I walked toward the car door, two figures suddenly sprang out from behind a dark pillar and blocked my path. It was Eric and Clara, seated in a wheelchair. At this moment, Eric's face was haggard, eye sockets hollow, his suit crooked and stained, hardly any of the elite he once was. Clara, sitting in the wheelchair, was skeletal, her face scarred and grim, eyes flashing with malice and madness. Irene, you've finally finished work. Eric gripped a sharp utility knife, glaring at me viciously, his voice stretched into a sharp, tearing pitch due to extreme distortion. Don't shout, and don't even think about running. I've disrupted the cameras in this parking area. I stopped, calmly looking at them, not showing the slightest trace of panic, not even the intention to retreat. What's this? You two stopping me in the parking garage in the middle of the night, planning to kill me on the spot? I asked with a steady tone. Killing you? We're the ones being forced by you. Clara, wheezing violently in the wheelchair, pointed to her disfigured face and paralyzed legs, screaming hysterically, Irene, you ruined me like this. And you've ruined Eric's future. You're successful now, glorious and enviable. So why should we live like maggots in the mud? Clearly you're the ones who violated regulations, framed people, and committed academic fraud. How has it become my fault? I raised an eyebrow with a cold smile. For words, do evil and you will reap the consequences. Don't you understand them? Enough chatter. Eric suddenly stepped forward, swinging the utility knife in front of him with a ferocious look. Irene, stop pretending you're noble in front of us. We're here today to settle this with you once and for all. With that, Eric pulled a stack of printed agreements from his jacket and slammed them onto the hood of my car in front of me. First, immediately call your lawyer and retract all criminal charges and civil lawsuits against me and Clara. Second, transfer all your patents from the Smart High-Altitude Safety Warning System project to me and Clara at no cost. Third, transfer $5 million in cash to our overseas account as compensation. Otherwise, you won't leave this parking lot alive today. Clara added slyly beside him. As long as you sign, transfer the money, and we'll let you go, and we'll never meet again in this life. If you don't sign, I'm already a cripple anyway. And today I'll join Eric in faking a draw with you in the basement. Let's see whose life is more valuable. Looking at the two panic-stricken, frenzied figures before me, I felt nothing but endless contempt. Did they think that by cutting ordinary surveillance in the underground parking lot they could privately threaten and blackmail me? They have no clue that after the deaths in my past life, my personal security and defenses had already been perfected to the extreme. At the very moment they voiced their intent to stop me, The seemingly ordinary metal button on my coat and the miniature ornament on my handbag had already transmitted full HD video and high-fidelity audio in real time via high-frequency microwave signals, encrypted and sent to the cloud servers of both the police and my personal security team. Furthermore, my vehicle was equipped with a 360-degree all-around independent onboard surveillance and audio light defense system, which had silently triggered an emergency distress signal upon detecting suspicious approaches and weapon identification. Instead of immediately refusing, I deliberately showed a hint of fear and hesitation, playing along with their performance. 5 million? Patent transfer? Dropping the charges? I followed their logic, slowly saying, Eric, extortion with a knife and kidnapping are serious felonies. You know how many years you'd get for that? You're digging your own grave. Don't you dare cite laws to scare me. Eric was completely enraged. He grabbed my collar, pressing a sharp paper knife against my neck. His face contorted as he roared, I already have nothing left. My reputation, my status, my money, my career, everything is destroyed. What does another charge matter to me? Just sign this agreement, transfer the money, and we can fly far away. Will you sign or not? That's right. Sign quickly. Clara, sitting in her wheelchair, stretched out and started yanking at my bag, screaming hysterically, This is all you owe us. You turned me into a cripple, shelling out a few million and some patents is already being lenient. Sign it today or we'll kill you. Fine. I'll sign. Don't be rash. I raised my hands, my voice trembling just enough, looking directly into Eric's eyes as I confirmed each word. Once I sign this equity transfer and settlement agreement and wire 5 million to you, you will promise to drop all criminal actions against me, and publicly admit that all the previous lies and slander were meant to extort money from me, right? Yes. Yes. Stop talking nonsense, sign now. Eric thought I'd completely surrendered, and ecstatic waves surged through him as he shouted, Earlier when I accused you of ruining the paraglider and pirating codes, it was all just to ruin you and steal your money. Stop talking and just sign. Did you hear that? I whispered softly toward the button on my coat. Eric paused, startled. What do you mean hear that? Who are you talking to? Rumblingly. Before he could react, piercing sirens and bright spotlights suddenly filled the underground parking entrance. Several police cruisers sped in, quickly surrounding my car, bathing the dark area in blinding light like broad daylight. Police! Drop your weapons! Hands up! Over a dozen SWAT officers armed with riot shields and non-lethal firearms rushed forward and instantly subdued Eric and Clara to the ground. The paper knife clattered to the floor. Eric pinned heavily beneath the car hood, face twisted with disbelief and despair. Meanwhile, Clara, still in her wheelchair, was so frightened by the sudden turn of events that she lost control and screamed discordantly from the ground. I fixed my crumpled collar, then smiled calmly as I pulled the receiving device from my coat pocket. Turning to the two being handcuffed away, I said softly, You've kindly recorded for me, in your own voices right before being incarcerated, your full confessions of holding me at knife point, forced extortion, and admitting all prior accusations of slander and false allegations. That final act, you delivered perfectly. After the knife-wielding blackmail incident in the underground parking lot, the police quickly detained Eric on criminal charges, while Clara was bailed on hospital supervision due to severe physical disability. However, the desperate inmate of the doomed path always manages to produce the most appalling struggles. Clara knew that once Eric's criminal trial concluded, she, as an accomplice, could not possibly escape prison either. In extreme despair and madness, she decided to use her last trump card, to moral coercion and extreme online mobbing, to muddy the waters completely. She secretly used covert equipment brought into the ward to forcibly launch an ultimate farewell live broadcast aimed at the entire internet. In the live stream, Clara peeled off all disguises. She deliberately unwrapped the wraps on her head and face, exposing without reservation the terrifyingly distorted face carved with jagged rocks to millions of viewers. She pointed at her paralyzed legs and laughed at the camera in a wildly insane and desolate manner. Did you all see that? This is me, once called a goddess by you all, now a useless wreck like a monster. Clara's voice was razor-sharp, instantly triggering a network-wide mania as dozens of platforms flooded with traffic and the online audience soared to an astonishing 5 million. I'm doing this live today to reveal the demon who ruined my life, Irene. She stared at the camera with bleeding eyes and tears. Yes. You all say I brought this on myself. That I violated regulations and modified things. But do you know what? On the day of the jump from a great height, it was she who kept guiding me, encouraging me to alter the parachute. In midair, she watched me plummet to the ground. Not only did she not save me, she even mocked me over the radio. The more she spoke, the more agitated she became, even taking out a bottle of sleeping pills and pouring it onto the table. Screaming frantically, I have nothing left now. She has driven me to ruin and death. Today, before 5 million people on the internet, with my death, I will exact Irene's death sentence. I want the whole world to see how cold-blooded and venomous this so-called industry rising star truly is. A killer. The entire internet erupted in chaos. Bystanders, unaware, were thoroughly shocked by the extremely bloody and extreme scenes, and public opinion online blew up again, with waves of online abuse and condemnation flooding my personal social accounts and the company's official website. So terrifying. Even if there's a grievance, watching someone die and forcing them to suicide is too cruel. This is pure psychopathy. Support a full internet ban on Irene. If Clara dies, Irene is an indirect killer. Watching this frenzy of moral coercion and nationwide online mobbing, there was not a shred of panic on my face, only a cold, bone-deep smirk at the corner of my mouth. Did she think using death as a bargaining chip, using extreme victimization, could coerce justice? Could it erase the facts? I directly opened my computer and used my officially verified account to request a forced connection to her livestream. When my image appeared on the right side of the livestream, millions of viewers instantly fell silent. All eyes across the network focused on the two of us. In the camera, I wore a sharp black suit, my gaze calm as ice, forming an extremely stark contrast with the disheveled, bloodied Clara on the other side. Irene, you still dare to connect? Are you satisfied? See me like this. Are you satisfied? Clara, seeing me, completely spiraled into hysterical madness. Clara, I said coldly, with a quiet but unwavering authority, your act is well played. But death and the internet are not your shelter. I didn't give her any chance to defend herself or keep ranting, and directly pulled up multiple notarized documents with absolute legal force and court-ruling decisions in the live streaming frame. On the big screen, the first document instantly aroused shock across the entire venue. It was the notice of case filing on the professional text about the knife-bearing kidnapping and massive extortion case in the underground parking lot, jointly issued by the Municipal Public Security Bureau and the National Security Supervision Administration. First, I pointed at the official seal and date on the notice. Last night, both you and Eric held weapons and intercepted me in the parking lot, pressing a paper cutter against my neck. You personally admitted to all your past rumors and slander, launching a forced extortion on me for 5 million cash and the core patent. The related on-site recordings and videos have long been submitted to the police, and Eric is now formally arrested. Immediately after, I presented the second bombshell evidence, the detailed money trace report on fund flows provided by overseas banks and the Economic Investigation Department. Second, your continuous pleadings for innocence and feigned suffering, demanding crowdfunding others for your life-saving money. However, according to data from the Economic Investigation Department, among the 3,500,000 yuan of donations you obtained recently through livestream tips and charitable fundraising, 2,600,000 yuan had already been privately transferred to overseas money laundering accounts before this case occurred. You are not cornered. Instead, you have been laundering money and preparing to abscond. Finally, I pulled up the real-time surveillance logs from the Mental Judicial Evaluation Center and the hospital. Third, the so-called sleeping pills. You're holding? Just ordinary vitamin tablets prescribed by a hospital. Using self-harm and feigned suicide to manipulate public opinion online, you're merely making one last desperate move before the verdict, attempting to morally blackmail judicial authorities into reducing your sentence. Each document, every piece of data, unraveled Clara's falsehood, cruelty, and cunning under the gaze of millions online, showing the irrefutable hard evidence. A reversal, an ultimate reversal. Among the 5 million viewers, emotions shifted from shock to fury, with the comment barrage instantly changing direction. overwhelming the live room with furious reactions. Goodness. We've been used by her again. She isn't just a failed murderer but also a fraud who stole and transferred charitable funds, claiming to commit suicide using vitamins to manipulate netizens? So disgusting. How narcissistically criminal. Support the judiciary in meting out strict punishment. Don't let such a venomous woman stay in society and harm the public anymore. Clara, staring at the sharply shifted public opinion on screen, at the document revealing her money laundering details, dropped the vitamin bottle in her hand with a clatter. All madness on her face froze instantly, replaced by endless despair and weakness. At that moment, multiple law enforcement officers in uniform and judicial police suddenly burst into the live stream frame. Clara, pursuant to relevant provisions of the law, you're under suspicion of malicious defamation, massive fraud, money laundering, and involvement in armed kidnapping and extortion. You are now lawfully under compulsory arrest. In the real-time sight of millions of viewers, cold handcuffs clicked shut, forcefully locking onto Clara's trembling hands. A few months later, inside a courtroom. Today was the day Clara and Eric's joint criminal case would officially begin its public hearing. Given the case involved multiple serious charges, including deception in a high-altitude accident, online slander, falsification of academic and professional records, illegal fundraising fraud, and knife-wielding kidnapping and extortion in an underground parking lot, as well as having caused extremely negative social repercussions, the trial attracted live attendance from dozens of mainstream media outlets and industry professionals. I sat on the plaintiff's bench dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue custom suit, flanked behind by the nation's most elite team of criminal and commercial litigation lawyers. Opposite the public gallery, the two defendants looked nothing like their once glorious selves. Eric wore a gray prison uniform, handcuffed and shackled, his head shaved bald, his eyes hollow and despairing, his body significantly thinner. Clara was pushed into the courtroom in a wheelchair by bailiffs. Her scarred face glowed grotesquely under the sterile white courtroom lights, her once arrogant gaze now filled with nothing but infinite fear and trembling withdrawal. As soon as the trial began, the prosecutor launched into a meticulously structured and forceful indictment, calling for full accountability of both defendants. The defendants, Clara and Eric, having the intent of illegal possession, fabricated facts and concealed information by initiating false charitable crowdfunding campaigns on online platforms, defrauding an especially enormous amount of money. Furthermore, they used the threatening act of brandishing knives to forcibly kidnap victim Irene and extort huge sums of assets. At the same time, defendant Clara is suspected of deliberately vandalizing public safety equipment and making slanderous accusations, while defendant Eric is suspected of embezzlement of official duties and accepting bribes as a non-state employee. With each charge announced by the prosecutor, the large courtroom screen simultaneously displayed the complete chain of evidence compiled by me and my legal team. Raw data logs from high-altitude parachute-mounted black boxes, official disassembly reports from Antarctic-level technical institutions, original audio recordings of private conversations plotting fund transfers, decision books from the Academic Commission revoking academic titles, and high-definition videos and panoramic audio recordings of the knife-wielding kidnapping in the underground parking lot. Each piece of evidence stood like an insurmountable mountain, blocking all of their escape routes. My lead attorney stood up, his voice booming across the courtroom. Your Honor, presiding judge. The defendants Clara and Eric did not commit this crime impulsively, they launched a calculated, organized, multi-dimensional malicious persecution that lasted for several years. They not only attempted to physically eliminate the plaintiff but also conducted a total assault on the plaintiff's career, reputation, finances, and mental well-being. Their methods were cruel, their motives despicable, their crimes of enormous harm to society. The whole thing makes even the strongest spirit of the public tremble with anger. We respectfully request this court give them the most severe sentence allowed by law. On the bench, the judge and the jury peers looked at the mountain of irrefutable files and video evidence before them, their expressions deeply solemn. The judge struck the gavel and turned his gaze toward the defendant's table. Defendant Eric. Defendant Clara, regarding the evidence and charges presented by the prosecutor and the plaintiff's lawyer, do you have any objections? Upon hearing the words most severe sentence, both defendants completely broke down. Eric trembled violently all over, gripping the front railing so tightly his knuckles turned white. wailing hysterically. Your Honor, I plead guilty. But I am not the mastermind. Clara forced me into this. She was jealous of Irene. She told me that if we destroyed Irene, we would receive millions. She even bought the knife for the kidnapping. I was just deceived by her. Clara, sitting in her wheelchair, upon hearing Eric shift blames entirely onto herself, immediately had bloodshot eyes and screamed as she tried to lunge forward. You beast. Eric. How dare you spread slanderous lies with blood in your mouth? Obviously it was you who told me that if we just grab Irene's patent we could turn the tide. You're the one who moved the overseas fundraising accounts in private under your name. You're the one who ruined me. It's you. It's you. It's you. You poisonous woman. Who ruined me? The two who once performed before the cameras the act of lifelong devotion. Unmatched love are now in court like two out-of-control mad dogs, tearing at each other, smearing dirt, accusing one another of being the true demon. The courtroom was in an uproar, and journalists in the spectator seats shook their heads with extreme contempt and disgust. Bam! Bam! The judge slammed the gavel hard. Silence! Silence! The court quieted. I sat quietly in the plaintiff's seat, my gaze cold as I watched this ridiculous dog-eat-dog farce, with not a trace of emotion in my heart. From the cold eye view from 10,000 meters up, to the sequential dismantling of the evidence chain, and now to the multidimensional reckoning in court, every wrong step they took was caused by their own greed and malice. After hours of court investigation and debate, the court adjourned for 30 minutes before the presiding judge returned to the courtroom, and everyone stood. The judge's face was solemn as he solemnly read the first instance judgment. This court finds the defendants Eric and Clara's criminal facts clear, the evidence indeed sufficient, and their crimes proven. In accordance with the relevant provisions of the criminal law of the People's Republic of China, the judgment is as follows. The defendant Eric is guilty of extortion, fraud, and taking bribes as a non-state staff member, multiple offenses punished together. He is sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment, with political rights deprived for 5 years, and a fine of 1.5 million yuan. The defendant Clara is guilty of making false accusations, fraud, and extortion, attempted, multiple offenses punished together. She is sentenced to 16 years of imprisonment, and all illegal gains are to be returned to the victims and the public. Bam! The gavel struck again, producing a muffled yet crisp sound. 18 years. 16 years. This means their entire youth and the latter half of their lives will be spent behind cold, heavy iron bars. The day they gain their freedom again, they will already be worn-out shells. After hearing the verdict, Eric's legs buckled and he collapsed to the ground like a lump of mud, wailing in despair. Clara, on the other hand, rolled her eyes and passed out on the wheelchair. I slowly stood up, tidied my suit, and without another glance at them, under the spotlight and shutter sounds of the entire media, I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high. After the verdict was delivered, in the final days of the appeal period, Clara and Eric were temporarily detained in the same special detention area within the same detention center, without the shelter of external public opinion, stripped of their false influencer glory and professional titles, and with their last illusion of escaping overseas completely shattered. The small, cold, and high-walled holding cells of the detention center became the starting point of lifelong nightmares. In a bid to reduce their sentences during the second appeal, these two, once declaring eternal love for each other, had completely degenerated into the most vicious and sinister enemies within the entire detention facility. Through the second appeal documents submitted by their lawyer and the detention center meeting transcripts, I clearly witnessed this pitiful yet tragic battle of trapped animals unfolding before me. To prove his status as an accessory and forced participant, Eric devoted himself night and day in the detention center to writing denunciatory letters to the prosecution. With malicious intent, he smeared Clara, painting her as an extremely vain, controlling, and psychologically disturbed maniac. He reported every one of Clara's past violations and altering solderings, every instance of privately insulting fans, and even dredged up old stories about her schoolyard bullying of classmates from years ago, attempting to prove his so-called innocence and goodness. All my criminal acts were carried out under Clara's coercion and instigation. Eric howled in despair during his meeting with his lawyer, gripping his bald head and frantically banging against the walls. She emotionally blackmailed me. She threatened to commit suicide. I had no intention of kidnapping Irene in the underground parking lot. She forced me to hold the knife. Please tell the judge, I am merely a victim. Put all the guilt on her. On the other side, Clara's situation had deteriorated to an even more tragic extent. Due to severe bilateral leg disabilities and facial infections, Clara endured excruciating pain daily in the holding center's hospital ward. Deprived of expensive medical care and precise medications, extensive muscle atrophy formed in her legs, while her facial scars worsened horrifically due to infection. Whenever nurses changed her dressings, the ward would echo with her heartrending screams. Yet even under these conditions, she still directed all her hatred toward Eric. Dragging her frail body, using the only hand still functional, she labored to scribble dozens of pages of accusation notes in bed. She frantically reported to prison guards and prosecutors every hidden crime Eric had committed, from privately receiving kickbacks from suppliers during his prior employment, secretly embezzling company funds, to clandestinely filming private videos of his ex-girlfriends in university for the purpose of blackmail, each detail indisputably submitted. Eric is a complete hypocrite. A murderer. Clara screamed hysterically toward her lawyer in the detention ward, spittle mixed with blood splattering onto the table. It was him who held the knife to Irene's neck in the underground parking lot. He claimed he wanted to kill Irene in the car. He was the mastermind. You must sentence him to death. Sentencing him to life imprisonment. If it means he dies, I'm willing to spend a few more years behind bars. During one routine pretrial evidence verification meeting for the second appeal, bailiffs escorted the two into opposite sides of a confrontation room separated by thick, bulletproof glass. It was their first meeting since being sentenced. The couple who once appeared affectionate and loving in front of cameras, declaring eternal love, when seeing each other through the glass, their eyes betrayed not longing or sympathy but instead the most primal and icy hatred. You damn crippled woman. You've ruined me. Eric lunged at the glass, wildly pounding on the barrier, his eyeballs protruding, face twisted like a rabid dog. Why didn't you just die smashing into those rocks? Why must you survive and drag me down? You shameless freeload. Hypocrite. Clara lay sprawled on her wheelchair, shouting madly at Eric through the glass, her voice hoarse like a demon tearing itself apart. Who was it begging me for attention back then? You. Do you really think you can step on me and escape? You'd better prepare to spend the rest of your life in prison, living with rats. The two endlessly cursed at each other in the interrogation room, spitting curses and desperately trying to charge past the bulletproof glass to strangle one another, until several bailiffs forcibly pinned them down, locked them with heavy handcuffs, and dragged them back to their cells. This ugly, animalistic fight between cornered beasts was recorded by both bailiffs and prosecutors. They thought that by clawing at each other and shifting blame, they could secure reduced sentences. But they didn't know that such complete lack of remorse and exceptionally vile conduct became the most decisive sentencing factor in the eyes of the appeals judges. The final judgment was soon issued. Appeal dismissed. Original sentence upheld. 3 years later, inside the Grand Hall of the National Exhibition and Convention Center, the lights were dazzling, the seats packed to capacity. Today was the annual International Extreme Safety and Smart Equipment Gala, bringing together the top experts, scholars, and business tycoons from around the world. On the big screen, footage of the second-generation high-altitude intelligent escape and self-rescue system I led the research and development of was playing. This technology had broken through multiple international industry barriers, saving countless lives of extreme sports enthusiasts and high-altitude workers over the past 3 years. Amid thunderous applause from the audience, the host announced in a voice full of respect, "Next, please welcome Ms. Irene, recipient of this year's International Extreme Safety Lifetime Achievement Award and Chief Architect of the Year, to take the stage and receive her awards." The spotlight instantly focused on me. Wearing an elegant, simple white evening gown, I walked steadily toward the podium, taking the heavy golden trophy from the presenter. I stood at the microphone, looking down calmly over thousands of industry elites. I showed no emotion, neither shed tears nor bowed humbly. My expression was peaceful and self-assured. All the reputation, dignity, and career achievements that had been stripped from me in my previous life were, at this moment, reclaimed with sheer technological might and unshakable ability, pulled back with force and justice. Thank you all, I said with a smile, my voice steady and firm. Safety and technology should always be expressions of reverence for life, never instruments of selfish desires and greed. My system exists only to protect those who respect life and uphold integrity. The entire venue erupted into another wave of overwhelming applause. After the awards gala, I went to the VIP lounge backstage. My assistant respectfully handed me a cup of hot coffee and then turned on a wall-mounted TV nearby. On the screen played a report by a legal news program. This station reports, today in the provincial First Women's Prison and First Prison, incarcerated individuals Clara and Eric had their requests for sentence reduction lawfully rejected by judicial authorities due to prolonged passivity toward rehabilitation and false accusations against others. On camera, the images occasionally showed the prison's interior. In a cramped and freezing cell, Clara sat curled in a wheelchair, wearing voluminous, tattered prison clothes. Her legs, severely deformed by long-term muscle atrophy, twisted and scarred beyond recognition, she looked like a wrinkled elder of 50 or 60, staring blankly at the small iron-barred window high on the wall, devoid of the trace of glory she once had during skydiving stunts. Meanwhile, in another detention block, Eric wore coarse prison clothing, laboring in a re-education workshop, shuffling heavy loads. The once refined man now slouched, his hands calloused, drowning in endless physical labor and remorse, completely reduced to a discarded criminal cast aside by society. Inside those tiny, dark confines, they would spend another long 15 years or so, with no social media exposure, no endorsements, no artificial applause, only endless regret and day-to-day suffering. I sipped my coffee gracefully and turned off the television. Outside the window, countless stars sparkled in the night sky, while city lights shone brilliantly. This rebirth taught me not to lose myself in hatred, but to sweep all the refuse that tried to destroy me into history's dustbin and slowly walk my own way back to the peak. Karma always returns in its own time, and my glorious new life had just begun.